Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of JAKTALK. My name is Jeff Kinsberg. I'm the visionary and founder behind JAKTOOL. JAKTOOL is a precision product development manufacturer focused on bringing enabling technologies forward for our customers in healthcare and our nation's defense. JAKTALK is a podcast where we focus on the people and processes of how ideas are turned into reality. And lately I've been saying how ideas are get to done because we need to move forward and get things out there. Today, I'm joined with Justin Russo and Christopher Gandy. Chris is our Director of Business Development for Defense and Aerospace. Justin is our Program Manager for those same industries. And between the three of us, we're getting old, or some of us are getting old. We've got about 50 years of industry experience, both from the commercial side and the government side. So thank you guys for joining us today on this episode.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll start off with you, Chris, because you joined us about a year and a half ago after 20 years working for the Army. And you've got a very unique perspective of, you have the perspective of, being a government customer and being involved with dozens of programs, both, at development level and at a production level. What are the advantages of a small player like JAKTOOL, working with the government and fitting into that DoD development ecosystem?
That's an excellent question, Jeff. Accountability. With a small organization, you ask for certain things and you get it done. A lot of these larger organizations, it's you ask for help on something, or a larger defense contractor will come out, and then you got to go through multiple levels to get something done, or get an answer, or get a response, or just nothing happens quick. With a small company like JAKTOOL, it happens relatively fast, and you're accountable for what you deliver.
I would like to say JAKTOOL 100 times during this, but we're not the only one in the ecosystem. Would you say, I think we do great things, but we do great things, but you've seen across the board for people in the development space, more agility and responsiveness to development work?
Yeah. I mean, you can. Smaller is more agile, typically, right? Larger, more bureaucratic. You have to get more approvals.
Mm-hmm.
That's just not a JAKTOOL thing. It's anything. The size of an organization, you grow. Any organization, you acquire other companies. You get multiple departments. The department in Minnesota has to check with Florida, has to check with Massachusetts, and all of a sudden, it's whispered down the lane, and nothing gets done quick. So
mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter who the organization is. Typically, I mean, I may be biased here, obviously, but I think the smaller, more nimble, and you can get stuff done.
Sure. I think there's that combination of small, agile, nimble, like you said, but also it kind of couples with, I'd say, me sitting in the entrepreneur seat, right, of wanting to make a difference, wanting to have an impact, wanting to leverage those unique abilities that a small organization brings. And small can be still pretty large, as you would define by, some industry standards. Small could still be 1,000-person company.
Yep.
But compared to the very large companies or the federal government, there's a lot of augmentation with agility, right?
Yep, absolutely. And I want to comment on something you said there. It just because you're small doesn't mean you don't have access to a lot of experience or a lot of projects. A lot of times your smaller, non-specific organizations that maybe work in healthcare space or other industries can augment problems that are specific, let's say, to ammunition from maybe a healthcare customer or consumer product. A company that has that breadth of projects that they're working with can really bring that expertise to the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess Justin, you've kind of grown with the organization and grown in the organization, doing a lot of both manufacturing and design, quality, to becoming program manager, and in many senses I've passed a lot of the reins, right, of mm-hmm. those relationships and accounts to you, where for a while I would kind of isolate or insulate some of those challenges, pain, discussions, for lack of a better term, craziness, right? Because there's a lot of dynamics that we're responding to make it easier for our customers to work with us, which is hard to explain.
Yeah. Well, it's a crazy world, and all of our customers are constantly adjusting to it. So I don't blame them for any craziness.
So I'd say what are some of the projects and obstacles that you've overcome to work with our government customers or our other defense customers to I guess common pains that have led to common successes? What are some of those behaviors that we could share with the world?
I just going back to what you said, I think the number one thing that's always the most difficult thing to deal with is change, and whether that comes from change in the world or change in what's happening in the world or change within organizations. That's probably always the number one challenge that's the most difficult to deal with. And it does take a lot of communication and honesty to make sure that you can get through a change order, whether it's on a job or in a program, to be able to still we ultimately, I think us and our customers, we share the same goal, right? Especially in the defense realm, that's just to enable the warfighter and protect the warfighter. And as the world changes and the needs of the warfighter change, we as a small company have the agility to adjust quickly. And when we work with these larger companies who may be a little bit slower to adjust, we typically allow them to. We'll do whatever you guys need to make sure that we can get the job done. So being able to be flexible, I think, has definitely helped us in our growth and me in my growth, being able to be flexible on the job here as well, right? Going from manufacturing to quality to design, being able to fit the need of our customers, fit the need of the business, is one of the main reasons in adjusting to that change of why I am where I am today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess one of the ways that we've kind of grown with our customers is, we use the term that, their success is our success. And, we've got several different personas or, types of people that we know are going to be interesting and enjoyable to work with. One of them, is kind of how the roots of JAKTOOL started, right? Where there's peers that go out into the world and want to work with people that share the same values and skill, and and I think that's what we're still doing that now, where we look for customers that have those interesting projects, but similar values and purpose behind them. And it's very easy to work together. But one of those groups that is, kind of engineers very early in their career, myself being the high fact finding engineer, always looking for reassurance, always looking for better ways, just those collaborative discussions of, I joke where my first customers would send me drawings and I'd say, I think your drawing is terrible. Why do you want to do this?
The customer is always right.
They were till they talked to me. No, I'm kidding. So there's a good discussion there, right? So we've kind of developed those relationships, or we'll call it bonding and rapport with those external engineering customers. Watch them be successful, collaborate together. They rise up through the ranks. How has this strategy, Chris? And I say this because we were very much in these roles when you were in the government and I was a customer, right? How has the strategy of building trust, and rapport with this community helped the community grow and JAKTOOL grow and that success?
Yeah, I think it all starts with respect, right? Respect for the customer, respect for the experts that you're working with. And like you said, you challenge, if a drawing comes across and maybe it's, it's missing a tolerance or a call out or something that's not maybe perfect or ideal. The whole reason people are coming to you or us or anybody is to help solve a problem. So if you're not respectful to the person you're dealing with or exchanging information with, you can't effectively solve a problem. So you have to come to the table with respect. And I think kind of the core values you talk about and we try to align ourselves with people who respect one another in the industry to solve a problem.
Mm-hmm. So with you mentioned GD&T and you mentioned respect. So this is like the daily discussion of Justin, you see new tech data. It's very, it might be draft or preliminary or for whatever mark is on it. And the customer says, this is what I would like it to be. And the question is this because this is an academic exercise or because you want to drive costs down, or, right? You don't know where that component lives in the program, and you don't know what are the real whys behind what is driving the definition of the component. How do you engage the customer to ask those questions to understand, is this development for discussion, for future production, and provide that lean mindset and activity to focus on what do we really need this to do and what don't we, and how do we find a low cost, durable solution?
Yeah, I think, it's just all through communication, and having enough respect for one another and understanding with one another, bonding rapport with one another to be able to ask those questions, those more difficult questions. Some people can look at a drawing, an engineering drawing, and they see it as a binding contract, right? Where if I make what's on this drawing, then I am successful in fulfilling that contract, right? And I think that's just not the case. It's a communication piece to be able to communicate your design intent to whoever's going to make it or implement it or whatever. And the communication is the piece that you need in place to be able to understand what those needs are. Where are you in that iron triangle of, cost, quality, timeline, and how can we help you get there? And you can use the drawing as a communication piece, but, ultimately, what is the final success criteria and what makes us successful, you successful? That's sometimes you can't communicate that over an engineering drawing.
Right. So I'm sure some of the team will hear this. So it's a customer that we dearly love. Right. And, there's very mature tech data, but the buyer, on his path to making an award says, I need you to put a note on your proposal that says this will be free from all burrs, right? So you could argue that the tech data is insufficiently defining the part, right? And this is an extra layer of protection. Mm-hmm. But I think it's interesting that even though there's very mature tech data, there's still that need for additional communication and initial, communicating what. It almost sounds like on this hardware, the hole could be in the wrong spot. We could accept that as a deviation, but there can't be a burr in there, right? And how do you know? How do you know? How do you know when? How do you pull out the real challenges that the programs are having to then relay that to the team? So that was just one example, mm-hmm. but it seems like it's such a shifting landscape.
I think to Justin's point, it's a conversation, right? And I think it's kind of naive when you say, "Hey, this is the only thing," and you put it down and you say, "This is it. This is the only thing that could possibly exist. This is the only way to do it." There's kind of a negative term in the industry called churn and burn, mm-hmm. right? Where it's just like, "Hey, I know this is wrong. We all know this is wrong. This is what I got to do. I'm just gonna make that right, knowing that it's wrong, and that's the wrong attitude to have, and that's."
Yeah, it's a waste of your customers' time and money and it's disrespectful, right? If you know it's wrong, then why are we going down that path? Bring it up when you notice the problem or think that there might be an issue, and save some bucks, save some time.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all taxpayers at the end of the day, right? I mean, if something's wrong or can't be done, you need to speak up and respect the buyer and the customer enough to have that conversation.
So, Chris, you said something which made me kind of think of, you said churn and burn. So churn and burn is, I'm associating churn and burn with following the process. Following the process to me sounds like we're checking boxes, sounds like we're making hamburgers, which we're not, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you work within an industry at large, right? So the DoD is what it is. It's shaped by federal policy and people live within those statutes. But you need to find the wiggle room to provide value with, like, it's an ever tightening rule book, right? And the people that are successful can live within the rule book and do the dance a little bit better than everybody else. Right? There's a balance to that. But the system itself, when you're looking at a very common DoD acquisition strategy, a FAR-based activity with lowest technically acceptable cost, that doesn't inspire conversations, right? That is the contractor responding. There might be clarifications, but that is the contractor responding to the government's request. And the government's not looking to have a conversation. Right? So how do you find the balance of, prime contractor or government or large entity that is transactionally checking boxes to move the program forward? How do you find the balance of that with where we live in this consultative space of, so most times everything looks great, right? But those times when you see an error, right? And you get an unresponsive customer. Hey, I'd like to raise my hand and ask a question. Time for questioning is over. I'd like to request an extension for a reason. That time is over. I'd like to revisit the process because this 50-year-old drawing, we don't have that industrial base anymore. Make it to the print. Nobody's going to do an ECP right now for a different process. How do you, you living on both sides, how do you have this discussion to people that are ingrained into them a very transactional system?
I think part of that is figuring out what your strategy and I use the term friends. It's who your customers are ahead of time, right? You can choose to, bid on sustainment type projects and contracts, or you can choose to bid on DARPA early on, low TRL level type stuff where maybe there's some more innovative, outside the box thinking. And, like you said, you can ask questions and challenge things. It's where you want to live as a business and that. And then once you decide where you want to play, if you want to be in the R&D space, early S&T space, or you want to be in a production or a sustainment role, I think even within those contract areas and areas, like even I spent a lot of my career in the production side of the house, and a lot of people think, production is just make the print and I don't want to say churn and burn because that's disrespectful, but just make my part, right? But even within large scale manufacturing, there's problems to be solved and kind of those creative outside the box, solutions to, how do I make it more efficient or more leaner, or how do I inspect this better, or what happens to this material that we've been sourcing for 30 years changes and I can no longer get it because of some environmental restriction, or, the country that we're getting for this is, we can't source it from that country anymore.
Right.
So there's creative ways to challenge, question and solve problems in that arena. I don't know if that kind of answers that.
It's the answer is as clear as mud. It's not straightforward. There isn't a one solution fits all, right? It becomes very tailored and hyper-focused, and you need to listen to your customer, understand what their goals are, and offer a strategy that is mutually beneficial. Right? I guess, Justin, so this question here, the next question kind of resonates with me from kind of recurring discussions that we have of how you're managing your customers. So I'll just read it off the paper so I don't butcher it. How does the slower pace of project development within your DoD pipeline, right, of DoD and prime contractors, due to the nature of its not-for-profit and other political factor, affect your operations, and how do you manage these challenges? So, and then I'll rephrase that. When we're working for a commercial healthcare company, they're on the road to market and commercialize it. And they say, for every day we're not to market, we're going to lose X dollars, right? And there's that incentive to get there. A lot of the times, because of the nature of the programs and the people and the process, I almost think that I almost think that people spend a lot of time, this could be with any large organization, but people spend a lot of time figuring out how to do their job versus just executing the elements of their job, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you balance the you're the connector between very large programs, customers, to our agile team. Our teams, we're going to go. And you're on the phone with the customer, and the customer says, we're thinking, we're waiting for something. We're operating under continuing resolution, pause, speed up. How do you balance that?
That's tough. It's definitely a tough question, and still something that I think, every time we run into that situation, we learn a little bit more about, what we did right, what we did wrong, and how to continuously improve. But understanding the why and understanding the impacts, and making sure the customer understands the impacts is probably going to be one of the most important things. Ultimately, I've got a team here who's trying to work hand in hand with you to accomplish your goals. And if those goals all of a sudden become unclear, well, our goals become unclear. So really trying to understand the why and the impact so that you can communicate that down to the team so that you're not just, there's always going to be pushback and being uncomfortable when, you say, hey, like that project that you're working on, like we got to put a pause on it for a minute, some stuff's changing. And if you can give the team the why and a little bit more insight as to why, it kind of softens it a little bit. And then from an operational standpoint, it's tough because you have resources that are allocated to be working on a project, and all of a sudden something changes and you can no longer, you have to pivot, and we have to have other flavors and types of work to come in and support that. And sometimes, depending on where you are in a project, you lose a lot of efficiencies in stopping and starting and stopping and starting. And like I said, you really got to have that conversation with the customer and let them know that, hey, like if we stop and then start, there's going to be nonlinear, cost or schedule impacts, because I got to get my guys working on something else. We got to get our team working on something else if there's no end in sight. So we got to understand, what's the goal, and is the end near? How long do you need me to pause for? Is it, you got a meeting scheduled for Monday and it's Tuesday and I got to wait a week? Or is this like, you're not going to know till, Congress passes a budget, and who knows when that's going to happen.
It'll happen soon.
Yeah. Identifying when the change occurs. Sometimes change is out of our control. Yeah. A lot of times change is out of our control, but at least being upfront, that goes back to the respecting somebody enough to be upfront with them and honest with them about where the decision's being made, or at what time or what level. It could be out of your control. Many times it is, but at least communicating that to the program leads, your customers or suppliers or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's where it all starts.
Right. So I guess I got another question here, which can kind of lead us to a topic for discussion. So the question is, the concept of enduring manufacturing seems pivotal to operations. And this whole concept of enduring manufacturing in the defense industry has become forefront lately with the current posture of the world and with the demands placed upon our defense industrial base. So we're talking about responsiveness, developing how to meet the demand of how to meet a demand signal before you see the signal clearly, right? So there's a little bit of vision looking to the horizon. So somebody's about to say, I see signals of this need in the field. And by the time that need turns into a requirement, turns into a development program, a lot of time has elapsed. So the person who can adequately respond to that need is already looking at the news, looking at signals. So when that requirement comes out, they're almost meeting it at that point in space, and they're ready to go. Right. So for a long time, we had one main adversary, right? The Soviet Union. And then it went from one focus now to a lot of different focuses. And all of those different actors or adversaries or threats that we feel as a threat have different requirements, different engagements, different environments, different vehicles, everything's different, right? So that requires a lot of products, a lot of new products within the defense portfolio to address these threats. Some of those products exist, some of them don't exist. Some of them need to exist for a moment in time to address a certain counter UAV threat, right? And that threat will be there until a very specific threat set will be there until the enemy runs out. And then the enemy gets a new UAV, which has a new kind of solution set to defeat it. So we went from this one centralized model of one adversary to a lot of adversaries, but okay, we can't control who the adversaries are, but we need to react with responsiveness for innovation, development, acquisition, and fielding to get our soldiers what they need almost before they realize they need it. How have you seen over your career that model evolve, Chris?
So,
and how do people become successful at meeting that demand almost before the demand is there?
So
there's a lot of questions there.
No, that's a real problem, right? That's I think the JSIDS process was like 7 years from the time that you identified a requirement to the time you fielded something. What is JSIDS? JSIDS, it was the requirements process that the DoD uses to identify what a requirement is and see it all the way through to how a bill becomes a law, so to speak, in acquisition land. And then over the years they had urgent material releases, so you could check the boxes quicker to get something fielded. And then of recent, there's this whole middle tier of acquisition where you can kind of streamline development processes and start engaging contractors sooner and quicker and try to field and develop solutions. I saw a post the other day. I guess the revamping the entire DoD budget process, which I was really pleased to see. I guess a year or two ago in the presidential budget, they had set money aside for a complete overhaul, which I think it was like the 60s was like the last time. When you allocate money, it has to be so far in advance of a problem that if you look at the old JSIDS process, it's 7 years by the time you come up with a requirement to the time something's fielded.
Your situation changed.
Your threat, you could design something for a threat. Yeah, the work could be over. They could be your ally, right? The threat for something you designed around could be like your best friend.
Lost, right?
It's like exactly. So I think things are being done. I mean, sometimes they're being done at a glacial pace to change, but I think the community is aware that there are problems, which is good. I mean, was it acknowledging that there's a problem is the first step in recovery? So I think there are things being done in the community. As far as in the private sector or industry, I know they're standing up offices and stuff to try to invest in the industrial base now that we realized, hey, you can't just outsource everything to China and then all of a sudden, this lowest cost technically acceptable solution. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I got these cheap made parts. Wait, did that make sense from a strategic perspective? Right. Mm-hmm. And so you have to, and we've lost, I'm preaching to the choir here, but we've lost so much industry overseas. And it's like, how do you bring some of that back on shore? Right.
And I guess, Justin, like when you're managing programs, most of the work that we do in-house is because of complexity or sensitivity, or we just can't get anyone to do it. And it's not because people don't want to do it. It's because there's a lot of encumbrances to being able to do this type of work. And how do you have the business case to make that investment before the work is actually there? So I guess, to the industry at large, right? There's we've got a beautiful country and we want to preserve it for our children's children's children. And it means making those investments so we can sustain those critical technologies that protect us. And just knowing the programs that you're working, I guess, can you share some of your experience of, I know that you're working alongside procurement, but I know that you hear a lot of the supply chain challenges. Can you kind of speak to some of that?
Yeah, I mean, so any type of the work that, like you said, we're keeping in house right now is typically something that's sensitive or for stuff that we can't find anybody else to do. And
it's not because we're that great.
No. I mean, there's and even in the past year, I mean, I've had suppliers who are approved with all the correct channels and have all the right documentation. Let their certifications expire because they're done with dealing with the bureaucracy that's put in place. And I think often what we see in this world as we continue to evolve too is now there's all these additional IT restrictions, and those have a huge impact on smaller businesses who can or can't manage like an entire IT infrastructure within their company, and they can no longer handle this classified or controlled unclassified data. And when you start losing those smaller suppliers, you lose competition, you lose the speed and the speed of competition and the pricing of competition. And I know we've had to make some internal investments to replace some supply chain that we may have lost, or to provide our customers with another avenue of a supply chain that is no longer there, or there's just not many players there. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to kind of look to the future to see what that's going to be, because it can happen very quickly. Mm-hmm. But it's a lot of listening. It's a lot of looking for those signals, getting those signals, and then acting on them, right, and having to make that decision that we're going to act on that. And that goes across, a lot of the programs that I'm working on, which are both similar and different, of this lost of a lost art of certain areas of manufacturing that we need to gain back to be, to be competitive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I guess optimistically, there's, as the technology shifts, I think there's new players entering the space, right? So there's been this constant consolidation in the industry post World War II. There's some pretty cool graphs out there where you see that there's like 50 players that ended up in 5, right? But there's, I think what's interesting is that technologies are affecting are affecting our posture that are not classical DoD technologies, right? You could argue that the cell phone is probably just as destructive or defensive, right? From a speed of communication, and everyone's got GPS and everyone's got video, and you've got you can control a lot with your cell phone, right? So you've got a landscape where the software, the connectivity, the IT network is really the backbone of the connective tissue of all these systems. So I would bring up that whoever owns that backbone really becomes the larger player in the game. Maybe. So, which is interesting because those incumbent companies like Apple and Microsoft and Amazon, and Google, right? They're very disruptive, innovative companies, right? Fail fast, fail forward, go. Never worked for them, but I can say by using their products and how quickly they evolve, they've got a good business in place, right? Yeah. So, is it too optimistic? Is this too much? Am I hallucinating to think that companies like that and other emerging DoD companies that maybe have some of that essence to them, like Anduril is a new player out there, do they start to bring to the innovation cycle and the process a new perspective that kind of breaks with the old, we'll call it bureaucratic way of doing things?
Yeah, definitely. And before answering that direct question, I think I just want to comment on one thing you said of whether or not these are programs or pieces that these, larger disruptive companies are bringing to the table, to the defense table. They're developing all this stuff also for the commercial market, right? And the stuff that the items, the technologies, the software that they're developing has risks and sometimes can bring in new threats to the country, to the world. I mean, we don't have to get into none of us are experts here on AI, but just look at how disruptive that's been over the past 6 months and how many new threats can probably, you can start identifying that these companies are creating while also trying to solve.
Yep.
And the existing players the 5 existing players who've consolidated down from World War II, that's not, a field that's necessarily their expertise. You have other companies now who get to come to the table and, whether it's solving the threats that they created themselves, I mean, they're still the experts.
Mm-hmm. I want to comment on something you said. I think, the commercial market, that's the key to drive the cost down, right? If you're a private defense contractor or you're the government and you have your solution, this piece of paper can only be used by the Department of Defense and this branch or this service of the, down to, and this is going to be the most expensive tablet you've ever bought, right? And people in the government and people in defense contractors and whatever have to look at what they're sourcing for their solution and just start asking some fundamental questions about the products and solutions that they're trying to do and say, hey, can the person sitting next to me use something like this? Can this department use something like that? Is there a commercial avenue for this? Because guess what? If there's a commercial market for that thing, or there's other folks in the government that you can use the same solution, or you can leverage it, it becomes a force multiplier, and the cost for that drops. But the problem is the ecosystem in the defense world is because you said it consolidates. They only want something that a solution that a single IP holder can have, which jacks the price up. But then that puts you in the supply chain issue that you have where it's not accessible when you need it because there's only one person in the world who can supply it. So I don't know if I have a good answer for it, but I think that's how we got here.
Mm-hmm. I think back to an early, this is 2000-ish, internet's there, but it's not fully searchable to all the nuances we can find today. And a friend of mine, Mike, says to me, do I have a copy of Mill Handbook 5? And I'm like, no. He's like, you need this. So, but just thinking about like things exclusively developed for the government, it's thousands of pages of material, engineering, joining, machine design, a handbook for how the military designs things. They've since phased that out and they rely on commercial industry to maintain those standards. But for the longest time, there was their own standards unit.
It's true. I think there's a mil spec out there for chocolate chip cookies. I mean, they get very specialized and they don't realize, wait, maybe there's like this other organization, Betty Crocker or something like that, who might have similar sorts of things that can, meet your needs.
We'll share that with everybody. We'll cook this up later. Awesome. Any parting thoughts before we move on?
I think what we started off with, respect. It all comes down to that. Respect who you're dealing with, respect the taxpayer, respect the warfighter, respect your customers. And you start there, and I think anything's possible. That's, you can solve any problem together if you respect who you're dealing with and communicating with.
Finding customers and companies and friends with similar goals, right? And aligning those goals and understanding that, not everything is as black on white as it is on a piece of paper. And that if we really want to achieve our goals in a changing world, fast, that we just need to make sure that we both understand what success looks like, for both of us. And that's the most efficient way to achieve that. Once you start adding the bureaucracy into it, gets a little bit more challenging. But that's where I think, small businesses and new forms of government contracting that are starting in these defense consortiums and this effort to help revitalize the defense industrial base to companies that are, smaller, less than, 5,000 people, let's say, is going to make a big difference in the coming future.
Cool.
Well said.
All right, Chris, thank you for joining today. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Justin, thank you for joining. A lot of great conversation. Everyone out there in the audience, thank you for your time and listening in. Please like and subscribe. Find whatever buttons are below on whatever platform you're watching or listening on. We appreciate you listening, and we'll talk soon.